Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. We are here with Ricky, of course. And Ricky's been traveling, so let's hear about your travels.
Yeah, so I we launched my cannabis brand Heisman. We launched in New Jersey. So we did a tour where went up and down the state, visited I think 25 or 30 dispensaries. Um, yeah, it was good. It's fascinating to me. We've launched in 8 markets now, and to see the different cannabis cultures in each market. It's so different. It's like in Jersey, it's really expensive to go to a dispensary. And so a majority of the people going to dispensaries uh, are like 45 plus,
Hmm.
and people that you wouldn't typically expect to see in the dispensary. It's interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think that people always think that when you're well known, any business venture you do is just turns to gold or like is really easy. Is that true, or is it kind of like sometimes it's like a bust, or how is that?
Well, I think if you're just a celebrity and you're just the face, usually you get a big chunk of cash or a lot of and some equity in the company. And then even if the company bombs, it's a hit to your reputation, but you got something in your back pocket. But I'm more of an entrepreneur. I'm famous, yeah, but it's like my business and my idea. And so um, no, it's hard work.
Mhm.
It's hard work because you realize you have to make money, right? You have to consistently do something that people value enough that they're willing to give you their hard earned money.
Yeah.
Um,
Isn't that weird? Like being famous isn't actually the best business. In fact, most of the famous people I know have the problem of being famous, which is now how do I monetize and live off that? Not that you're only, but a lot of fame is like helps you market a product or whatever, but that if you're not a good business person, like that won't really help you anyway, you know?
yeah, yeah.
So,
One thing I will say that's consistent about fame is it gives you access, but it's all about, do you have the skills or the team around you to be able to exploit and maximize the access and turn it into revenue.
hmm, interesting. Yeah, I really like entrepreneurs. I think of all the creativity that I encounter, I think entrepreneurship is one of the coolest because it's like you're building something from nothing, just like an artist would do with a painting, but it happens to be something that will make money for other people and you can have employees and like you can actually do a lot of philanthropy with entrepreneurship and so I like to hear about your endeavors, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite endeavor is my astrological astrological entrepreneurship. Um, and we touched on it last week, but I do feel like part of my, and I hate to use big words like this. Well, I don't hate it, but I know it annoys people. But I do feel like my life mission really is to push the things that we're talking about closer and closer to the mainstream. Um, yeah.
That's actually really cool to know because with your reach, we could hit the mainstream. I mean, you and I are just exercising our muscle, having good conversations, right? But it's like you never know how far. I mean, I can get on a plane and meet you somewhere and speak to a bunch of football players. It's not like I can't come, help hold a good conversation in front of the masses or the mainstream. I think, making astrology relevant to normal people is really an art form, you know like for example, PMS. Okay, so I just did a Kepler video on Mars and Saturn, and I was talking about everyone's like, oh, Mercury retrograde. I'm like, what about PMS? Passionate Mars syndrome. It's like we all know normative people know what PMS is. They know that their girlfriend gets cranky sometimes. You know what I mean? And it's like the astrologers could be taking that way further and be like, what do we do about crankiness? What are good uses of crankiness? How do we cyclically work with people? It's just like I feel like we could be like taking things that are normative like PMS and like really working them as philosophers. That's just one example.
Oh, I love it. I feel like that's my passion. I feel like that's when I'm working on my app. I feel like that's it's really what I'm like. I feel like I'm sculpting something, like chipping pieces off, and um, yeah, it's wonderful. It's cool because it's creativity. And it's funny. It's like we're going to talk about Uranus today.
Mhm.
We're going
Okay.
to talk about Uranus today. So I'm a Virgo rising, Gemini sun, and I have Uranus. I think one of the tightest aspects in my chart. I have Uranus opposing Mercury. So ruler of my
Oh.
ascendant, ruler of my sun sign. Okay, and
Your Mercury's in Taurus opposed Uranus and Scorpio.
yeah. And just to add a little bit, they're both square Saturn in Leo. So nice little T square.
Wow.
And so as a kid, I stammer. I had a stutter. I had a stutter.
Wow.
But my mom, she I wouldn't say she beat it out of me. She got it out of me.
Good euphemism.
Yes, yeah. But I think about I was always into computers, technology, even though we didn't have a lot of money. My mom worked for the government, and so she had access to the computers that they didn't need anymore. And then when I went into the NFL, right, the guys on my team would joke because I had all the new gadgets, I had computers that were open. And when I wasn't chasing women, I spent all my free time like learning Photoshop or learning how to code or just learning stuff on a computer. But it wasn't until a couple of years ago that because I started working on this app and I realized I don't speak app and the developers don't speak astrology. So something's got to give. And so I said, I'm just going to see if I can learn a little bit of coding so I can speak to them a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And once I did, I was all in. It's like I couldn't get enough. I couldn't get enough.
Well, and for listeners, like a person who's a Mercury Uranus conjunction or opposition is usually a genius. Like, I guess if you read the books about it, you'd say like a know-it-all, knows too much, has constant epiphanies, mind can't settle down. But the square to Saturn would make Ricky feel like I'm not smart enough, or like people would kind of like so that T square is like this weird double-edged sort of like, you're wondering what you don't know with the Mercury square Saturn, and then you keep getting epiphanies with the Mercury Uranus. So it's like building something where you constantly don't know enough, like building an app is kind of a great use of that T square.
Oh, so a great use of the T square. This is right. I remember with the first time that I was really introduced to astrology. Okay. And I remember at the time thinking, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to understand this stuff. And I can't help but study it. It's like both. And when I say there's no ever, that's kind of Saturn, but really, right, it's going to take me forever, right? A long time, right? It's going to take me a long time. And even though I had no idea what I was doing, I was obsessed and I just did it and did it and did it. And 15 years later, right, there's like a little crack where a little bit of light started to shine through after all those years. And I think of, wow, like good use for that T square. And and I felt lost
Some
in
people
my
say it
life.
takes 14 years to learn astrology. I just want
Yeah,
to.
I felt, oh, I was right on time. I felt lost in my life really until I found astrology because it gave an outlet for the T square. Because before then it would be all the things you read in the books of misunderstood, right? Everyone, what the hell is he talking about, right? That some people thought I was crazy, some other people thought I was a genius.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I think you're a crazy genius personally, but
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, it's true.
yeah. Well, okay, so Uranus for you is an important planet because it's touching that chart ruler. And so, I think for the common day listener of our show here, it's like we need to say like what is Uranian energy generally?
Yeah,
I'm happy to speak to stuff, but I love giving you a show every week so we can hear you.
yeah. Well, I'll say this. I'll say, when I was in the first grade, I took in Southern California. They had like they call it the magnet program, where they had the good schools, some good schools in the bad neighborhood, and they bust the kids in the bad neighborhood to the good schools in the good neighborhood. But the way they got around it is they had a tier system where everyone was tested, and most of the white kids tested into the advanced classes. Most of the kids that were bussed in tested to the regular classes. But the Mercury, Uranus, right? Somehow I tested and I was in the advanced classes. And so from first grade until all of elementary, I was like the only black kid in my class, and I was the only kid in my neighborhood that was in that class.
Wow.
And so I just, again, you can see, and it's not, oh, no one understands me or I feel misunderstood. You can see, right, is they didn't have the ability to understand much about me because they were kids in the world they were, and there were a lot of people like me in their world, and kind of vice versa, right? Kind of vice versa. So I was different, and that even the thoughts that were normal in my house, right? When I speak those thoughts in the classroom, everyone's like, "What are you, what are you talking about?" And the things that everyone was talking about around me, right? I didn't necessarily couldn't relate to it based on my home experience. So, right, my mind had to grow and learn how to do different kinds of things.
Hmm.
So I think at the core, Uranus is the need to be ourselves, the need to be unique. And I always tend, like, a good exercise I do is I imagine the planets operating in the animal kingdom,
Oh,
you
oh,
know,
that's epic.
right?
Okay.
Right. And and I was watching this and then you watch documentaries on animals. So I was watching a documentary on wolves, and a lot of wolf packs is like only the alpha mate can mate and have, like, some of them, right? But they do control who's allowed to have sex, right?
Yeah.
And if you imagine, right, you're in the group and you're supposed to fall in line with what the alpha says, right? But you got a powerful Mars, okay? In a big fifth house, right? And you need to have that experience, okay? You need it, right, to be able to feel alive. And you don't have a strong Uranus, you're in trouble, right?
Oh.
So this idea, right, to have enough dissociation and separation from the powers that be in the group to at least be able to recognize, right, what's good for me, right, and what's not good for me based on the group. And sometimes if it's not good for us based on the group, right, but we do the math and we say, okay, I can tolerate this for a couple more years, right, from what happens when we turn 14 or 15 until we turn 18. Right.
Yeah, and the Uranus square happens when people are 21, 22, which is they really do some differentiating from their family. A lot of them are in college, and then all of a sudden they start, getting their own ideas about things. And, we get a lot of that, you know, Uranus energy in that early 20s.
Yeah, well, it's that, right. It's that idea of someone leaving home, okay, and there's, like, different roads they can go down, right? Are they going to go down their own path, right? Or are they going to go down the path that their parents told them that they should go down,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Think of that feeling when,
That's
kids
a
get
good
to
point.
college. Yeah,
Sorry.
I
No,
was like,
that's
kids
just a
get to
really good
college and
point
they,
that the Uranus allows us to differentiate into our own path. And so it's actually a survival function. It's not like we can actually
yes,
even live without it.
exactly, 100. That's my point. That's why I like to go to the animal kingdom, because you can connect to how it's necessary for our survival, right? If the whole group, right, is following a leader that's not doing what's good for them, do you have the ability to see that, right? Do you have the ability to recognize that the emperor is not wearing any clothes,
Mhm.
right? Huh.
Interesting. Well, and like even in babies, okay, so like the an evolutionary need to stim yourself with something new or different. Like, okay, I put on like 14 different outfits before the show to be like, what's uranium? Well, how can I surprise Ricky? Like, whatever. And then the only thing I come up with is these weird teddy bear earrings that are just like the weirdest thing I would ever wear. Like, I would never even wear this. Like, what, and I was like, Uranus is just so weird, new stim, it's like whatever's like new and different, even if
Yeah.
it's just weird, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, for babies, it's like, like like let's say they get used to their little walls or whatever they're they got you got what do you call that, baby gates or whatever. And so
Yeah.
then they see something outside the baby gate and they're just like, oh, I really got to see that new thing, like whatever it is, right? And so then they like start busting down the baby gates to
Yeah.
get to the thing out there or whatever. And so I like it's literally the one of the planets that makes us bust out of our routine or bust out of our safe comfort zone to explore new territory, honestly.
Okay. Right. Oh, that is so perfect, right? My whole Uranus spiel, I start off with the woman finds out she's pregnant, she goes to the doctor. It just happened, right? When the first time my wife got pregnant, we went to the doctor and the doctor was like listening and she was like, "Uh-oh, I don't hear a heartbeat," you know? And then she did the ultrasound and she was like, "I'm sorry, there's no heartbeat." And then what she said next, right, is you right, your body couldn't hold on. Right? I'm thinking of cancer. Your body couldn't hold on because it's this little baby, like a seed, right? You got to hold on to it and nurture it so that it can start to grow, right? Fast forward 5 months, okay, mama's starting to show, and the question pops in your mind: how is that baby gonna get out of there? Right? That's the image I got, right? Busting out. How is the baby gonna get out of there? Where at one point in the cycle, mama needed to be able to hold on to it. At another point in the cycle, right, baby's got to bust out
Yeah.
because it's outgrown the comfort of this place. It's not comfortable anymore. And in order for baby to become who baby is truly meant to be, it's got to leave the womb,
Wow.
right? And then baby leaves the womb, and right there is family. Okay, family, same thing, right? Baby needs family. Baby comes out, baby can't do shit, right? Baby needs some, baby needs some benevolent adult and people to take care of it. But then again, we get to our teenage years, closer to 21. Okay, in order to become who we're truly meant to be, right? We have to get away from them, right? Because
Yeah.
it was a container that we needed, but now we've outgrown that container, and we have to sever that cord, right?
Yeah, like if kids didn't go on their own at 21, 22, they wouldn't find a career. They literally wouldn't be able to support themselves. I mean, they'd be like a mama's boy, like mama would be taking care of them, honestly, without that. And like then the Uranus opposition in the middle-aged teenage years. I mean, that is actually like when you bust out from the employers you've had between the first Uranus and the second Uranus, it's like now you've got a boss, now you got a career field and all that stuff. And then you start to feel all like, but now I got to bust out here. And this is when we got people busting out into being an expert, or like, like you maybe busted out and just were like Astro. I'm sorry, but I'm Astro. I don't know because it was on your T square. I have no idea what you did there, but like,
I had a kid, but that's it.
well, you already had a bunch of kids though.
But that's the beauty of it, right? That's the beauty of it is it it just like Carl Jung said, midlife is the opportunity to live the unlived life. And I think a lot about the Uranus opposition is that again, the 21 we leave home and there's the crossroads, right? But the crossroads you can only take down one path, and there's other paths that you could have taken but you didn't take, other viable paths that you could have taken that you didn't take. I think oftentimes the Iranian opposition, right? Some of those paths reappear. It's funny. My teacher talks about, because again, the midlife crisis. He talks about um, when he had his Uranus opposition, he built a treehouse.
Uh,
Right, and just going through the act, like something got to express something, right, that didn't get to express back then. And
yeah.
for me, my Uranus square, I had my first child, but I was not ready, like not one, like all of that stuff, right? Is like move, okay, come back again. My Uranus opposition. All right, my wife gets pregnant. I have an opportunity. For the first time, and again, I have 6 kids, but this is the first time where I'm getting up in the middle of the night and changing diapers and burping the baby, right? All of that. I didn't have that experience with the children the first time, but this time I do. I do.
Interesting. So it's,
Yeah.
it's like a new look at the same thing, even can be Uranian, this is another one. If we were taking, astrology to the football weed smokers, we could totally talk about the midlife crisis because that's a, cultural trope. I don't know if trope's the right word, but like a cultural thing that they talk about constantly. And we could be like, well, what's, astrology say about, the midlife crisis? Because
Oh,
we can
oh.
actually say there's a function for it. There's a reason for it. It's here for survival, blah, blah, blah. Get your Ferrari, whatever
I
they.
go, I go, I go all into that, right? The way I say it, I say the universe has given us half of our life to figure out who we are, and the other half to start being it. Right? And I say, I tell someone half of your life has been an experiment. What have you learned? Start using it. And I also truly feel like if we get to this midpoint and we don't haven't figured out at least a little bit who we truly are, that the universe starts to pull the life force out of us. Cause it's like, you
Oh yeah, you gotta go. We got stuff to do. Yeah.
yes.
So I'm just looking at in remediation, like the Uranus page. It's saying like Uranus vibrations are electric, jumpy, high vibrating, chaotic, penetrating, exciting, innovative, revolutionary. But it says Uranus needs to evolve quickly, revolt. So I think revolting or revolution is very Uranian, because like you might have had a revolt or against your first 6 kids to have another kid. Feel
Yeah.
like no, I don't know.
I definitely had to revolt against my first wife to get out of that marriage, to be in a situation where I could have a child with someone in a different kind of situation. And right when that divorce occurred, Uranus was conjunct my Venus, squaring my first wife's Venus. Right. This is to me fascinating, right? When there's Venus, like especially like oppositions, conjunctions, and squares between people's Venuses, because when Uranus, for instance, hits one person's Venus, right, it's also aspecting the other person's.
Hmm.
That's one of my favorite things about astrological remediation about your book is how you show like when one planet is making an aspect by transit, all of the other aspects that are being triggered at the same time,
Hmm.
right? Because it's especially when you think in terms of relationships, right? We talk about inner aspects, but the inner aspects really come to the fore when those planets are both of those planets are being aspected by the same planet.
Yeah, that I can see that with Uranus on Venus and Uranus square Venus would kind of blow, especially a traditional relationship up. I mean, I think if you were old and a little bit of a non-traditional person, you could probably do that with some like kinky, weird, like role playing and I guess,
Well,
but it depends. It sounds like you kind of needed to exit. So the
well,
revolution was,
that was my point is the revolting and the revolution. It depends, right? It depends how far away you've gotten from your true nature. Right? I think if I'm talking to like someone about a Uranus activation, and I say, right, our parents, right, or our culture set down a path for us, and we're trying to go down that path, but in a Uranian time, right, we start to hear like a signal, a signal that's like beckoning us to go off the beaten path, you know
Mhm.
and if we listen to it, right, we have the opportunity to find our unique path, right? But if you do it right, you got to go through the brush. You might get nicked up and scratched a little bit because you're going off the path. But if you find it, it's worth it.
Yeah.
And I say, but if you ignore that, right, sometimes there'll be an explosion and it'll blow you on your path, but you're missing a leg, so you have to limp. so you, so you,
Oh my
you have
God.
to, right, burning bridges, right? That's what happens in a Uranian time where we wait too long and we don't listen to that voice, right? A lot of times there's some kind of explosion where we get the message, but right there's damage, right? There's damage that we have to clean up.
Yeah, let me ask you this. Is Mars and Leo stationing on your T-square right now?
It's not. It's not. It's
It's at
actually
6.
it's close. Yeah, it's close. It's
Oh,
definitely the opposition because the Mars is at 7 degrees. I mean, the Mercury's at set. My Mercury's at 7 degrees. Uranus is at 8, so it's close.
oh, it's close. Well, because in my house, we both have Uranus at that point in Scorpio, and we've been preparing, with for this Mars square Uranus because both of us have it. And I was like, we don't want any crazy like lost legs, you know what I mean? So we're probably like strip club tours because Uranus and Scorpio generation
Ah,
is a little naughty. I mean, let's be real, like cosplay and strip clubs, okay, but like. That's Mars and Leo, right? Like,
yeah.
but it's like it's really interesting to manufacture Uranus transits because like they surprise even the astrologer. And so it's like, how can you plan to surprise yourself? One year I threw myself a surprise party and I was like, all right, you gotta surprise and shock me in some way, but I know you're gonna do it. Like so how
Yeah.
do you plan for surprises?
You surprise other people, right? You right, because part of that is right. Don't be afraid to shock other people. Don't be so
Okay.
this idea of shocking people,
Did I
right?
shock you with my strip club tour?
Um, an invite might have been more shocking, but but Uranus and Mars are accident planets. And
Yeah.
research done, those two planets are the most active when accidents. Mars first, Uranus a close second. But there's another element related to Uranus transits that I started to notice is usually a Uranus transit, like a person, a human being comes in and has an uncharacteristically powerful effect on us. And it typically doesn't last long, but it's like, I'm not getting political, even though I'm talking about a political person, Donald Trump with Uranus square his sun. And there's something about a Uranus activation where someone can like have a magical power over us. It's like we say the epiphanies, but sometimes those epiphanies come through someone, right? Either something they say or literally, right? They smack us in the face, and it's like, whoa. But it's like the mental wavelength is a person, right? That it comes through a person. And it's like something takes over us and the person leaves, and we're like, why did I do that? Right? Why did I? And
Wait, isn't he a Southern Gemini conjunct Uranus? Because
exactly.
okay,
Yeah,
well, okay,
exactly.
so I actually did a
And
lecture.
opposing the moon. Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes. I did a lecture on the teleological purpose for Donald Trump like 10 years ago, which is what is his purpose here? And I talked about that, Sun Uranus, and I said, he's here to mix it up. You know how he
Yeah.
says the weirdest shit? I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, you thought you knew what was going on in our country. And then he just says something so off the wall that you're like, I don't even know what's going on. Like, well, I don't know. Like, what's going on? Like, and that's Uranus energy of just like constantly constant revolution with him. It's like constantly like stirring the pot, basically.
But yeah, and I think like why is like for me, it's like why is everyone so obsessed with him? You know?
Yeah.
And it's the sun, powerful sun and moon, but I think the thing that takes it over the top is the Uranus.
Yeah.
And because again, I think it's something if we think of and you know all about this, right? Is that Saturn, you know, there's the ceiling, and then we go beyond Saturn. That's when we find Uranus. So Uranus is that blowing the top, blowing someone's mind, right? So I talk to someone who has a lot of strong Uranus stuff in their chart, and I tell them, you're on this planet to blow people's minds,
Whoa.
right? And
He
I
is a
also tell
mind
them,
blower, actually.
yeah,
That's a good
yeah,
point. Yeah.
right, literally, like whether the mind blown is a positive thing or a negative thing, right? And you can hear it sizzle, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
But
I actually do think that there's the entertainment factor of Uranus too. Like if we look at what is it for, it's like to keep things exciting, to keep it fresh, like never get boring. I don't think there's ever been a boring day with Donald Trump in office. And and I think maybe the public just likes the entertainment, honestly.
yes, yeah, but the entertainment, but we talked a little bit about being in the age of Aquarius, and Uranus is one of the rulers of Aquarius. It's a right, you can feel it. It's a Uranian time, right? Everyone wants to be themselves, right? We get to be whatever gender we want, right? It's like this search for like, and I gonna tell you I have or how I'm supposed to act, right? That's so anti Uranus and Aquarius because it's the opposite of the expression, right? Of a unique expression of what we are capable of. And I think the beautiful thing is in order to tap into that, you have to go beyond. You have to go beyond Saturn. You have to go beyond tradition. You have to go beyond what you've been told.
Mm.
It's kind of like, right, is you need the structure of the mom to get you to a baby so that you can cry, but then you gotta like somehow revolt, right, and literally cut the cord and be more able to take care of yourself.
Well, I feel like our show is very indicative of your Mercury, Uranus, Saturn because you're taking the kind of structure that's been given to you by the mom and dad of astrology and be like, these are the planets, and now we're taking it beyond that to race intersections of race and like I think that it's like it's a beyond show, like we're actually going beyond, and that's why we're gonna have to like teach people that the show exists and that it's actually we're gonna. I just want this conversation to become like normative eventually, but it's going to take a minute. But so let's actually look at this Uranus in different cultures. Like, so what are your first thoughts on Uranus?
Okay, perfect. Is exactly what you just said, going beyond. So before we can understand Uranus in each culture, we have to understand the structures and the strictures of each culture. You know?
Interesting.
All right. So again, as a little kid, I got beat up for talking like a white person.
Mm, interesting.
All right.
So being in your culture, saying there's like some kind of container of mental like I guess you're saying your Mercury Uranus was kind of like a little too smart in some ways, or a little not too smart. That's not the wrong word, but like a little too philosophical. I mean, what's it even mean to talk like a white person anyway?
But we're getting to something. So, right, there's certain expectations, right, of how we're supposed to behave based on our skin color, based on our gender, right? And so, in order for us to understand Uranus, we have to understand what are those expectations.
Well, I feel like it's more like air, like you have a very like erudite way of talking. Is that the right word? Like, because I feel like in African American culture, there's a kind of like swagger to the talking of just like, I'll bring up Ebonics as a beautiful thing. Like, I feel like there's all this like color in that dialect or whatever. It's very like almost like musical or something like that. And you kind of have this kind of calm way of talking. I don't know.
No, but
I'm
this
put
is
my
it,
foot
right?
in my
It's
mouth.
not. It's right that if you right if I'm around a bunch of other African Americans who haven't been around that and they hear me speak, they can't help but rise in their mind to right however right whatever their relationship is with Uranus, if they're going to look at me and whatever their relationship is with Uranus, it's going to come to their mind.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. It depends on a group and what are the unwritten rules or expectations of how we're supposed to be in that group, and what happens when there's something that's authentic about me that doesn't vibe with the expectation of the group. And I
Interesting. And
think
I think every pocket of African culture would have a different set of rules, right? Like
yes,
every neighborhood, in fact, would have different sets of rules. So I
but
love it. So
it depends on the diversity of the group. So growing up in Southern California, where there's not a whole lot of African Americans, right, the group becomes more important. But I remember the first time I went to Atlanta, and there was like heavy metal African Americans. There's like you had a whole like variety of different ways that you could be black, and because the group was much larger, and so you can see Uranus in that environment can express more as unique and individual, so there's probably less need to revolt. Where when the group is smaller and they have to stick together more, the need to revolt, it becomes more powerful because there's going to be more people in there with strong Uranuses where they don't match the expectations that the group is putting on them.
interesting. God, it makes me think of like certain groups revolting against traditional society, but then they develop their own rules.
Yes,
Like a
yes,
gang even will like develop their own rules. And then if you revolt against those rules, then and you're gonna have a transit to Uranus eventually, and then you might
yes.
revolt from that. So I love that what you're saying. This is really brilliant, Ricky, actually, of like that each culture and microculture has Saturnian containers that then
Yes.
Uranus will break out of,
Yes,
essentially. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
Right. And it's break out of, but hopefully, I think the ideal is to help evolve, to
Yeah.
individuate, because there's something sound in the principles, but we have to keep thinking, how can we take these sound principles and allow them to fit the most amount of people?
Yeah, interesting. You know who I keep thinking of is RuPaul. RuPaul has a Sun Uranus square, and like think about like that's an identity revolution of just like who am I today? And like all of a sudden RuPaul's in a different outfit and a different outfit, and it's like like it's just thinking of people who are other certain people who are Uranian archetype typically is like people who are
Oprah, Oprah,
constantly
Oprah.
providing a new way to do something, you know what I mean? And probably maybe these are thought leaders in a field. Would you put
I
like,
think my one of my top Uranus avatars is Oprah Winfrey.
oh, what's her aspect?
Well, she's got a lot of aspects. First of all, she's an Aquarius, but my system where I tabulate the strongest planets, Uranus is her strongest planet. And I always find it fascinating when someone's strongest planet is also the ruler of their sun sign. Right.
Oh, interesting.
Right. And if you see where she came from, like a small town in Mississippi, you
Yeah.
know, right? And then if you think about it, right, in the 80s, 90s, right, an African American woman from the deep in the South, right, one of the most influential women in the world. And if you look at her audience, all different shades and colors and thought leader, right? Are you kidding me?
Hmm.
Right? How many people, housewives, right, domestic people have become more spiritual because of Oprah?
Hmm. Oh yeah, totally, totally. Well, okay, so I'm thinking of white culture, and it's really hard to like categorize all of one race or culture and say what are the rules there because it's like the rules are different in each family or they're different in each
Well,
school.
but I think but this is what they're so powerful, right? That sometimes we don't even recognize them until we're in an Iranian activation, right? A
Uh,
simple one, like especially right, and this is regional, right? I have a good friend of mine, one of my best friends. She's an Aquarius. Oh man, she's an Aquarius female, and she grew up in the South, right? And right, it's really really difficult for her, so difficult for her, like right, like she's married but she doesn't even like when her husband touches her boobs, and I'm like, I like no
how about when he
judgment,
touches her calves?
nothing, right, nothing. It's like, and I'm like, and I like no judgment here, but to me, like, to me at least, the purpose of like living with someone is that you like them. you
You
know
get to touch
but
their boobs, man.
exactly. so, but it's like the if you're a Southern woman, you're supposed to get married and do this, and the amount of money she spent on adoption and none of it ever worked, and all of this torture to herself because she's not what she's supposed to be,
Interesting.
right? Oh man,
I
it's
see
a
what you're saying. Whereas it's like the maybe in this Southern white culture, you're supposed to get married, love your husband, do all these things, be a good wife, blah 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 blah. And she's like busting out of like every
oh,
box she could be in.
man. But that's the whole thing, right? I think depending on like even, there are some Iranian cultures more right that give you more of a shove or an encouragement to be outside of the box. When I see Uranus in the fourth, I say, right, either you were the black sheep in your family or your family was the black sheep in the neighborhood. And if your
What
fam
about rave culture or the
ah
circus or the circus? Like I feel
that
like there
perfect, right?
are
That's
cultures where you're supposed to be popping, and that's the whole thing.
exactly right. Or even like the taggers, right? It's like there's an identity, but even then, right, you're part of a group and there's a certain way you're supposed to act. And if you don't act that way, then
Yeah,
man.
dude, I'm a Uranian person. I'm a Mercury Uranus conjunction, and Mercury rules my chart, and it's trine Jupiter. And I think remediation, I do think I have like led the field forward in certain cases where, like I'll say things like, I think AR is the new EA. Like, well, don't tell
Yeah,
Stephen Forrest.
yeah,
But I'm just like always trying to push the field forward. And I think that's very Uranian. And so if we looked at like, the rules of astrology, but okay, but if it's cool to like follow the rules, like you understand essential dignity, you know how the aspects work. Like there's bad Uranian energy where you're like, no, a 90-degree is not a square.
yeah.
Or like I use these crazy aspects like sesquiquesquus quadrate or like there's ways where you break out that's like there's ways to break out and be kind of Saturnian where you're like bouncing on the rules that exist and then like jumping forward. I mean, like maybe that's a good aspect of Uranus or something.
Well, it's compensation, right? If Uranus has a constructive place to flow and we put our energy there, it'll go there. But if it doesn't, it's going to come out and all because it right. I tell people, I say the gods got to eat. The planets have to express themselves.
Yeah.
So if it's not coming right, if we're not getting out of a relationship that we should not be in, right, then we're going to be using crazy aspects. Right? So,
Well, I do think it's interesting to look at the Uranus square people and their life trajectory versus like the Uranus trine people because the Uranus square people really go nuts at 22 and 44 or what like when the Uranus squares hit those things, they just go nuts though. Like they're just like they're in this traditional experience and now they're freaking out, and then there's people who have like Uranus sextile, Uranus trine, and the Uranus sextile I think hits when you're 14 and then when you're 28 getting ready for your Saturn return. So I think there are people who express Uranus in a very easeful way, and those people also kind of push things forward, but in a just less jarring way.
my wife is like that. She's got Uranus in the 10th house.
Oh,
She's
nice.
she's very much like that.
Mm.
It's cool to be around. A lot of times she does things that I'm like, I would never think about doing that. But for her, there's much she doesn't even it doesn't even register to her.
Yeah, yeah.
There's been so much ease because when I think of trines and sextiles, I think of amount of effort. And when you have trines and sextiles, it requires less effort for Uranus to work out for you. When you have the hard aspects, it requires more effort for it to work out. An example for me, right? Being young, no one understood what I was saying, but leaning into it, right? I realized that, and I would try to say things in a way that made it easier for people to understand, knowing I was doing it instead of feeling misunderstood or not being upset when people didn't understand me.
Yeah. Well, and I've learned a lot from you today. I know we only have 1 minute, but I do want to say that it makes me think of your family with you and your wife and how that system, that culture has Saturnian rules that you guys have developed over time, and that even the two of you keep busting out of those rules. And like the fact that you can time these like busting up, and you're a more of a mania buster, and she's more of a like a, it's like that's such a cool thing that you guys know Astro because
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah.
yeah, I know. I love my boyfriend's Uranus. It's sextile Mercury and Virgo, and it's he's smart, man. And, like
Yeah.
if I need a new solution to a problem, I know I can talk to him. So, um, well, gosh, Ricky, I'm sad to see us go today because I've been having such a good talk with you.
Yeah, we got the moon next week, huh?
What's going on next week? The
We
moon.
got the moon. The moon.
All right, let's moon each other next week.
Yeah, I'm down.
All right, sweetie. I'll see you soon.
All righty.
Thank you.
You got it.
Bye.